Hello, everyone. Today, I would like to talk to you about poop. Yes, you heard it correctly, actual poop. Specifically, I wanted to highlight how the pollution of our waterways and the lack of raw sewage regulation presents a very clear public health threat that goes far beyond your typical messaging regarding infectious diseases like enterococcus bacteria and norovirus. And yes, these pathogens do infect and pollute our environment, but what they're really doing is interrupting our ability to connect with the living world around us. My name is Ryan Henderson. I'm a microbiology professor here at Mount San Jacinto College. I have an extensive research and academic background in infectious disease, immunology, biopharmaceutical research. Before we get into the pollution of these living systems by poop, I'd first like to talk about what makes up those living systems themselves. Now, scientists have known for many decades, about 70 years now, that all cellular life on this planet is made up of those same structural subunits. When we arrange them in sequence, we get a molecule called DNA. And when we swap out one of those genomic Lego pieces, thymine for uracil, we get another molecule called RNA, both of which work together to give rise to all life on this planet as we know it. Now, when we zoom out and we look at the structures that DNA makes, we start to see some incredible shapes appear. DNA folds on itself in very tight, concentric shapes that we call chromosomes. These contain all of the hereditary information that give rise to us as human beings. Now, scientists have also known for a very long time that the DNA, that blueprint that exists in all the cells of your body, gives rise to another molecule called RNA. And a game of telephone gives rise to another molecule called mRNA, and eventually expressed as a protein. Now, what are these proteins? Well, we see these proteins manifest in life sometimes as pigments or colors. Plants produce pigments that we know as chlorophyll that appear green to our eyes. Bacteria, like the ones on the plate in front of you, produce pigments like reds and purples. Those short, small, concentric, yellow, off-white colonies, well, that's Staphylococcus aureus, the same staph bacteria that live on your skin. Now, the production of pigment is not unique to microorganisms or plants. Human beings also produce pigments. We have melanins in our skin. And when we look at the UV input into the planet Earth, we can see equatorially people with melanocytes producing eumelanins in the skin are going to show hues and shades of black and brown. And as we move away from the equator in the tropics and migrate closer to the upper latitudes, well, we see a switch. Melanocytes are now producing pheomelanins, pinks and yellow hues. How did we get here? How did we get from that very small micro world to the very large macro world where we're seeing human beings producing pigments in skin? Life on this planet had to make connections. They had to form relationships with one another. And we refer to that in the sciences as endosymbiont theory. A theory in science is a position that is backed by an enormous amount of evidence that can also predict future unseen phenomenon. It's not a conspiracy theory made up by one person to try and trick everybody to believe some nonsense. Now, for the first time, we have been able to see endosymbiont theory in the laboratory. Fungal cells taking in bacterial cells in order to form a complex relationship that then would give rise to higher order life forms. We hear these terms often in our life. Fungi, bacteria, viruses. Well, what is a fungus? A fungus is what's growing on the fruit inside of your refrigerator. Open up that drawer and you will see those raspberries covered in fungus. Now, if we turn up the temperature, fungi are able to switch to a different morphological presentation. They can turn into yeast. And we have been using yeast as human beings for thousands and thousands of years, essentially as long as we've had civilizations. We use yeast to make breads and beer, alcohols. We even use different fungal species to make medicines like penicillin. Now, it's important to remember when we're talking about those smallest microorganisms like viruses, which are essentially just DNA and RNA wrapped in protein, they're made of the same structural subunits that make up bacteria and fungi and protists. And as we move higher and higher on this evolutionary timeline to more complex organisms, it's important to remember that those same structural subunits are present, and they start to give rise to higher order functions and larger structures like intestines, pharynx, esophagus, uterus, testes, bladders. What do these terms sound like? Yeah, they sound like helminth worms, parasitic worms. I know you were thinking that. No, these structures are the very same ones that we find in us, in human beings. And indeed, all life on this planet is made of those same structural subunits with the same functions that we find in the highest stratification of life, us as human beings and higher order mammals, and the lowest, smallest, most rudimentary forms of microorganism like a virus. Now, when we collectively take all of these organisms, humans, bacteria, viruses, fungi, and we put them into one spot, we start to see the formation of ecosystems like tropical rainforests, savannas, deserts, chaparral grasslands. And in these ecosystems, the activities of each of those levels is completely dependent upon the energy level above it and below it. The grasses at the bottom, at the producer level, that are eaten by the rabbits and the deer, that affects the predators that eat those rabbits and deer, the lions and tigers and bears and wolves. And then we have us as humans near the top of this pyramid. And at any time, should any one of these levels become dysregulated because of the overpollution of their environment, that activity disrupts this entire system as a whole. And when we're talking about ecosystems, it's not an energy pyramid on a slide in your biology class. What we're really talking about is the west coast of Kauai, the Nepali coast. We're talking about the foggy trails of Pacifica, California, which makes for excellent running, by the way. We're talking about the Yosemite Valley. These are the ecosystems that we must seek to protect from pollution. Ecosystems like the Pacific Ocean. What you're looking at here is an aerial view of the southwestern San Diego region where the Tijuana River meets the Pacific Ocean. And flowing out of that river mouth is raw, unregulated sewage, poop. Literal, you know what. Fill in the blank. Every year, millions and millions of gallons of raw, untreated sewage are diverted by the Tijuana Sewer Authority into the Tijuana River, which flows out into the Pacific Ocean. In the winter of 2017 alone, an estimated 250 million gallons of raw, untreated sewage was diverted into this system as a whole in one winter. Now think about that. One Olympic-sized swimming pool holds 660,000 gallons of water. Now visually, multiply that by about 375, and that amount of literal poop was diverted and dumped into this ecosystem. At the moment, this represents the largest health danger to the continental United States right now. Larger than measles in West Texas, bigger than tuberculosis in Kansas. Now, in the summer months, where does all of this waste go? Does it just disappear? No, of course it doesn't. It forms sediment on the seafloor. A study conducted by UCSD in collaboration with the Scripps Oceanographic Research Institute, the Seaside Study, sought to add data to this phenomenon and mimic the wastewater flows out of the Tijuana River mouth. They use a non-toxic pink dye to monitor the flow rates up and down the coastline to see just how far and how extensive this raw, untreated sewage problem might be. Now, in the summer months, we have equatorial storms coming in from the southwest direction, dredging up all of that sediment that is collected over the winter. And it recirculates and recycles all of those infectious diseases back up into the water column, in what we call upwelling in the surfing community. Now, those infectious diseases are back into the system, and they even aerosolize, and they found this pink dye as much as 6 miles inland, polluting the communities in this area. Now, I am a biology professor, but I'm also a parent, and I'm also a surfer. I have a personally vested interest in the conservation and the protection of these waterways. Organizations like the YMCA are unable to run their summer programs like Camp Surf. And what this really does is this deprives children that ability to connect with the living world around them. Because you see, when people are able to connect with that living world, these conservationist type messages, they don't even need to be communicated. They're already innately and inherently understood. Because again, we are all impacted by pollution of these environments. All life on this planet is structurally the same, all of which are impacted completely at a functional level by the overpollution of that environment. You see, the mind cannot go where the body has never been. If people in general are unable to experience what it's like to paddle over that first wave in summer camp and feel that saltwater spray on their face, the hot shining sun and that warm sand, we are robbing them that unspoken ability, really that opportunity to connect with the living world around them. I think that is a cause worth championing. I think that is something worth fighting for. Thank you.